Welcome to another episode of the Educators podcast. I am Mr. Burden, and with me is one of my dear friends, one of my favorite people on the planet, and the parent of one of my former students, which I always think it's funny when I say former students, because in my heart, they're my students for life, of course. But I am talking about none other than the legendary Jeanette Garcia. She is a TA, a teacher's assistant for special education. She is in the trenches with all of us, making sure that our students can grow and become the best that they can be. And I'm so excited and proud to have her. We're going to have a great conversation, a lot of insights. And not only is she a educator, but she's also a parent of a student with a very special student that has a special place in my heart, and I'm very excited to have you. Hello, Jeanette. Welcome to the Educators Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. That was quite the intro.
Oh, I had to give you that intro. I'm really excited to be chatting with you. You and I first, it's funny too, because you and I kind of first met as you were the parent of your daughter who was in my class, but also you come from that educator's background as well. You had started as a para, correct?
Yes.
And that was pre-pandemic.
Yes, pre-pandemic. So I was trying to get my foot into the door in education, more specifically special ed, because I had to switch in careers. And I was hired to do one-on-one in special ed. So I was very excited about it because I'm like, oh, here we go. Not only do I have my foot in the door, but I get to work in special ed, which is my vocation.
Yes.
So it was so amazing to, I mean, I was a little heartbroken when the pandemic, because then my job was non-existent.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to have one-on-one face-to-face when there's a big lockdown.
Well, yeah, because see, my job had to do with transitioning students to their specials, to inclusion, how to manage behaviors, and really, I mean, you can't manage behaviors online.
There's only so much you can do. Hey, get off that bed. Stop bouncing on the bed, or I'm gonna mute you.
Well, put that chair down immediately.
Exactly. What was your career before? Like you said, you switched careers. What were you doing before that?
Well, here's the thing. There's a little story. Okay, there's a little story here.
Awesome.
So prior to Angie, I was living in New York, and I was wrapping up. Well, I wasn't wrapping up. I was midway my bachelor's in political science.
Nice.
Right, because I actually wanted to go to law school to be a civil rights attorney.
Very cool.
I had this all planned out, and I was going to go into this law prep program at St. John's. Well, I came to Virginia Beach, and Angie appeared, and I moved down to Virginia Beach just because I didn't think New York was really a good place to raise children. And I finished my degree. It was in government. I decided to continue that path, still being a mom. And then I went on to get my Master's of Arts in Law, because I took the LSATs to go to law school, but because my daughter, being a parent took up most of my time, I felt like it wasn't really realistic to go to law school. So I'm like, well, let me just settle for a master's. Well, when Angie was 2 years old and I noticed she wasn't hitting those developmental milestones, I found out my daughter was DD, what they call developmentally delayed. So a majority of my life with Angie has been helping her through this, process where, like, we started with speech therapy, occupational therapy. I put her in early intervention because I knew my daughter had a disability. I didn't know what it was. Yeah. I just knew that I had to make sure I did everything to give her the tools and resources that she needs to function in a classroom. Because I didn't know, what elementary school was going to be like. So I'm like, well, let me make sure I'm doing everything I can, and I'm seeking all the correct services to help her. And I was right. She took the ADOS test, and she has autism spectrum disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I knew it. Let's just keep this going. So although she was in early intervention for like 2 years, I still was working with her at home, you know, with like math and reading and helping her with her speech. Then when it came to behavior, I sought out ABA services, which I love ABA. I mean, I can just go on a rant about that. But the point is, starting at not being able to speak at all to at 5 years old, where not only was she like reading, but doing math. I taught her to play chess.
I got to ask you a question. There was a time where Angie didn't speak at all?
Nothing. She nothing at all. She was...
The Angie I know, that's not a problem.
They don't believe it. No one believes it. No one believes it.
Wow.
I know, because she's quite the chatterbox, right?
She's always got interest. I mean, it's captivating. It's never dull.
At all. So now we're trying to harness that.
Yeah, we focus now. We got to take that energy, harness it this way. Exactly. But I don't mean to interrupt you, but that took me for a second. I was like, she wasn't speaking at all. I'm like, didn't she?
Not one word. It was nothing. There was no words at all. And I knew nothing about parenting. I'm like, who does? Right?
There's no handbook. Yeah.
I was the one Googling how many words should 2-year-olds speak. Like, I was doing all that. I'm like, oh, she doesn't speak anything. Well, from not speaking and not really understanding why she did certain things, and with the ABA therapy, you know, I was so proud to see how much she progressed with her behavior, how much I was able to understand her and the way she would communicate with me. And of course, her vocabulary just exemplified.
Yes.
You know, she would use word. I remember this one time, I don't know where she got the word from, but she saw a woman that was pregnant, but she wasn't sure if she was pregnant or, you know, if she was overweight. She's like, Mom, is she pregnant or corpulent?
Whoa.
I'm like...
You're like, what is corpulent?
well, you know what? I knew what it meant, but I think she's heard... I've been in school for a long time, so I have all these words, but she's been picking up everything. Yeah. So I was surprised she knew to put that word in that context.
Mm-hmm.
I thought
That's
that was
awesome.
Hilarious. But anyway, let me just kind of stop. With all the progress that she made, I was motivated to go into this field. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you know what? I want to go through this all over again, but with other kids. So then I'm like law, that's not my thing. We have enough lawyers anyway, right? I think right?
Yeah.
and she was the one that kind of motivated me to go into special ed.
That's kind of a cool blessing, you know, that it's almost like Angie diverted you into a field that you wouldn't have otherwise looked into, and now here you are. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then did you start to feel those same successes with other students as with Angie?
Oh, absolutely. When I started as a para, and my job was only one child in particular, but you know, I just couldn't help myself. Every time I saw a child that was misunderstood,
yes, I like that.
I would always go in there, and I would always tell the teachers that I don't know how to mind my business, because I was always everywhere trying to find out, you know, how can we help this child? Because the children that come off as like the troublemakers, you know, and they're just labeled as that, a lot of times they feel like that's their place, and they will just continue behaving that way. And there's so much punishment. There's so much we have to correct. We have to discipline. I'm like, no, we need to find out why.
Yeah.
Why is this child behaving this way, and what are they trying to communicate? So that was just what I was doing, and I kept working with other kids, and thankfully the child I was working with, she wasn't a behavior. Look, I didn't have to be. She was. So she allowed me, but she was always with me. She'd be like, Miss Garcia, look. She'll help me out too. Like, look, I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, oh, a behavior. Hold on. Let me go get it.
She was your watch. She was on the. She was your not hall monitor. She was your deputy.
Yeah, she was.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting too. You mentioned earlier. You said kids that are misunderstood. Do you feel like now? I do feel like that kids do crave structure, and I think sometimes the pendulum swings the other way. But we might be a little bit too lax on our discipline or our regulation. But I feel like, and I want to know your thoughts. Do you feel like there are a lot of students that, and then maybe in the past as well, have been misunderstood because their behaviors are the manifestation of their disability or the manifestation of that, or like you said, those labels too? That's a second question I'm talking about. But at first, do you feel like students can sometimes get misunderstood and labeled as a troublemaker when in reality it's their disability manifesting itself?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely the disability, or even what we call typical developing children that don't have disabilities, but they do have some type of emotional trauma, or they're going through something.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, disabilities. We have so many kids that don't have IEPs, and it is clear that they need one. And a lot of times, those are the kids that I've gravitated toward. Like in the past, when I was everywhere. Right now it's a little different. I'm kind of set like in one place. Yeah. But those were the ones that I would gravitate toward because because I knew there was something, but there was no IEP in place. So I would try to be some type of support system. And if there was a teacher that, first of all, I had to make sure that that teacher was okay with me helping, because some teachers are territorial. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Who are you?" I was very careful, and thankfully I've come across teachers that welcome my help. Like, "Miss Garcia, what do you think?" And we'll come up with behavior charts, and I would give them ideas based on evidence-based practices that I've learned throughout my master's program. Like, well, we can do this and we can do that. And because of my background in ABA, I have all these tricks up my sleeve that I share with everybody. And I think that's one of the best things I love about my job, is that I have all these tools and I get to share with everybody if they'll have it.
Tool belt, the toolbox. You're like, all right.
I'm like, who needs it? Who needs a behavior?
Or you're like, what's it called? There's an app for that, or I have a tool for that. Yeah. Talk a little bit. I do want to go back down this path further, but tell us a little bit about ABA. What is ABA, and how has that helped fill your tool belt, if you will?
Well, ABA, it stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. It's definitely inspired by, B.F. Skinner about behavioral communication. So I learned about it when my daughter was receiving ABA. Mm-hmm. So when your child receives ABA between the ages 1 and 5, is usually in a clinic, but then they can come to the house. So what it is, it's behavior interventions that help you decipher the function of the behavior.
Okay.
So we'll use my daughter, for instance, since we can, my daughter, whenever she was frustrated, she would throw things at my mother and me. She would try to hit us. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh. So, the first thing I thought was like, okay, so why is she doing this? Because clearly my daughter wasn't like an angry child or anything like that. So with ABA, I learned that, that her function of behavior is attention seeking. Because there's four. There's four functions of behavior, which is attention seeking, access to tangibles or preferred activity, sensory stimulation, and escaping or avoiding tasks.
Yes.
So first you have to find that out before you know how to provide the appropriate consequence for the behavior. Yeah. So since my daughter's behavior was based on attention seeking, I had to find out, well, why does she want attention? Is it just because she's trying to tell me something, or does she just want the attention?
Yeah.
And then I learned on how to, when she's communicating something that she needs, then I start teaching her how to use her words. Like, when you need this, we do this and that. Now, when she wanted my attention, I would implement what we call the extinction procedure, right? Where first you just ignore the behavior completely until it's extinct. And I do that a lot in the classroom, I do a lot of extinction procedures. The only thing is that it's difficult because sometimes people assume that once it's working, it works. But then there's that extinction burst that takes place. I always wait for it. I'm like, where's the burst? Where's the burst? But then that's when you have to hammer down on that whatever intervention that you have in place. Yeah. It's all about consistency. And it's about you have to. Oh my gosh, you have to be consistent with whatever behavior intervention you have. So anyway, the whole thing of ABA, it's about unlearning negative behaviors, reversing them, and
reinforcement.
Yeah, reinforcing positive behaviors.
Yes.
And that's really all you're doing. And then you're coming up.
Goodness. BF Skinner is smiling at us right now. I love this. This is great. I love that stuff because positive reinforcement is like the key. That's the key to get
absolutely. Because, kids, they need a reason why to behave. Why should I behave? So then you provide them with that positive reinforcement. If they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's when you give them that attention. If they're like attention seeking, like with my daughter, every time she showed me exemplary behavior, I'm so proud, or I am so impressed, or because I knew she was an attention seeker. I'm like, my daughter, so I would only give her attention, and I would tell everybody around me. When I took her around my family, I'm like, look, you have to ignore. I became the biggest control freak. When we will go places, I'm like, don't give her attention. Don't give her attention. Leave her alone.
Yeah.
But that's what you do. And in the classroom, you start doing that too. You try to find out, okay, well, what's the function of behavior? Why is he always disrupting all the time? Is he trying to avoid taking this test because he has an intellectual insecurity? He doesn't want to fail it. Why is this one rubbing his head all over the floor? Maybe it's sensory stimulation. Maybe we need to apply a DRA, give him something appropriate to stimulate sensory. And that's always my question every time there's misbehavior. Okay, what's the function? How can I apply a DRA? How can I reverse this behavior?
How can I tweak this to match his need or his function?
Yeah,
absolutely. And the other key word you said was consistency. Do you find those sometimes, which is consistency and a typical school day do not match up a lot. So, but it's such a struggle for any teacher to provide consistency, but it's like because of the structure of the day. But how difficult is it to stay consistent with a behavior plan, let alone just basic classroom management?
It's extremely no, it's not even low. It's extremely difficult, and I hate saying this, but it's almost like impossible. Yeah. Because you have so many different kids and different personalities, different needs, because you have first grade and above where there's just one teacher, and then of course you have kindergarten and pre-K where you have two, but even so, even when you have certain classrooms where there's two teachers, it's difficult to be consistent. Yeah. Because there's so much. I think when it comes to behavior is a field in its own. When you're a teacher, you're there to teach a curriculum. You're there to help the students learn the curriculum so then they can move on to the next level.
Yes.
And teaching behavior, that's something I hate. I'm going to tell this because I'm a parent.
Yeah.
And I'm a single parent. The behavior, that's on the parent. Because teachers are now parenting. Mm-hmm. Teachers are parenting. And we already know that as a teacher, you have to, because you've mentioned this, that you have to be a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, all that. Because teachers are actually known as the secondary maternal figures in a child's life.
In some cases, they're they're more of one. In some cases, yeah.
Yeah. So our role is crucial, but teaching behavior, man, because you have to be consistent, because you have to have the right plan for that child. Because then ABA could be traumatic if you don't apply it correctly.
Yeah, right there. Boom. That's such a key point, because I think a lot of times certain ideas or techniques are shot down because they're not given their chance. Like an idea, like if it's not implemented correctly, anything can be dangerous if you don't use it correctly. Like if you try to use a hammer to put in a screw, you're going to cause damage. But what that is you're just using the wrong tool for the job, or you're using the tool. If you try to take a nail and what I'm saying, if you use the tool incorrectly, it could cause more damage. And I think that's the same thing with techniques. Is if you haphazardly just try to say, all right, we're just going to PBIS this kid, and not truly understand what you're doing, and the techniques and the importance of consistency, the importance of reinforcement, but also tempered with structure, then I think sometimes we want to just throw a Band-Aid on it because we're in that survival mode of, we got so much going on. But it seems to me like it's so important that you use the tool correctly, because if you don't, it could have the opposite effect, and then your job becomes even harder.
That happened to me 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
With PBIS. You would assume that PBIS is something that always works.
Only if you use it correctly. Yeah.
There was a student walking down the hall. It was time to go. Everyone's ready to leave to, enjoy their spring break. And I knew who this kid was. And I knew his background and his disability. Well, he was walking down the hallway with his Chromebook open, and one of the safety patrols, actually Angie, because she's a safety patrol, she said, close your Chromebook, please. So he was closing his Chromebook. Like, it's like he was closing his Chromebook, and then once I said, good job listening, and he threw the Chromebook against the wall, and I'm like, ooh, I should not have said that. I should have left it alone. And I caught that. I'm like, you know what? Because I didn't have an intuitive nature to say anything. Let me just throw some PBIS out there.
Yeah.
And
but I wouldn't like that was a human thing. You were excited that he listened.
I did.
And the fact that was a beautiful moment, because Angie communicated, politely and correctly. She wasn't taking this, I'm the authority in the hallway. You better close your Chromebook, because I've even heard some safety patrol kids, they get that little bit of power, and all of a sudden they feel like they're in the army. But Angie's so sweet about it, and I wonder if Angie knows how she would want someone to talk to her, so that's why she said it that way. I wonder if that could be part of it too. But
I think she was authentic when she said it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I wasn't authentic. And because kids, they respond authenticity to you being organic. And it wasn't. It was phony. I'm like, let me just... My behavior, intuitive nature didn't come in. It was just me. Let me just throw some PBIS. Just because. And that's why it backfired. For me.
Kids are so much more perceptive and aware than I think a lot of people give them credit for. That authenticity is so important. Like I used to see some teachers, what they would take that I call it, it's almost like a lobotomized smile. Like they're like, so great job today, Timmy. And the kids are like, you're just so fake. And the other thing is, when you try to pretend to be into something, like one of the things I try to do is get to know the kids, what they're into, but really kind of try to know what they're talking about, or ask them to tell me what they're talking about. But there was a teacher that she was making this poster that said Minecraft does his homework, and all the kids know that Minecraft's not a person. Minecraft is the name of the game. But this was somebody that was trying really hard to impress the kids, but it backfired, because the kids immediately know this person's being phony. And kids know when it's being phony. And I think that's kind of been my problem with the implementation of PBIS, is I don't think it's being implemented the way it was originally supposed to, or the concepts behind it. Because when I looked at it, there's a lot of B.F. Skinner, there's a lot of sound psychological and behaviorist philosophies, but I think it's being implemented as this, like you said, cure-all. But I feel like your approach, the ABA approach, your approach of, let's figure out what's causing this, and is much more effective in the other side of it. Being genuine, being authentic, is more important than anything.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I work with so many different behaviors that stem from a disability. Mm-hmm. So that my approach, I have to wear so many hats, because there's some kids that I work with that are all about like that physical touch.
Yes.
And like they need it, and they're like, and they want the, oh my goodness, oh so much, I'm so proud of. They need that. Then you have some that you're like, yo, you gotta get up. Come on, let's go. Let's go do this, and then we're gonna do this, and we just keep it simple, all right? Because they just need a flat out. They don't want anything emotional. Then you have some kids, especially like the brilliant ones, that they want you to talk to them. I'm like, look, I think you're a great leader. You're gonna do it, but you have to do this first, because if you want to be a teacher like you say you do, then this is what you got to do. Yeah. All right. So to be here, you got to be here. So then my voice changes throughout the day on what kid I'm talking to.
I think that's important, and I think an effective teacher, it's not being fake, but you do have to communicate. Like that's Carolyn Ann Tomlinson. You've got to communicate to the students the way they want to, the way they're most accepting of taking it. A closed mouth can't eat. You've got to come at them that way. But you're also, the way you're even talking that just now, that sounds so much more authentic than, we need to remember to close our Chromebooks. That kids you're gonna lose them immediately.
I agree, because you're talking to them like they're inferior.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You're talking to them like you're inferior. They're inferior.
Kids want to be treated like the person that they are.
Because they're people.
They're people. They're humans. They haven't come out of the oven yet. They're still baking in the oven. The dough is not there yet, but soon, they're going to be adults within 10, 15 years. It's like when you talk to them like they're these little, like you're in romper room, I could see kids getting upset. I do want to talk about your observations of how schools, how elementary specifically, is changing the way that they do discipline, and like the behavior structures. Because I noticed, before I left, and I noticed this at my previous schools, that it seems to be a shift where we almost are swinging the other way, where I think it's tremendous that we are trying to identify antecedents, and we're trying to get to the bottom of behaviors, but it's starting to get to a point where I feel like we're almost ignoring certain behaviors and writing them off as, and I almost feel like that also does that labeling. Like I was talking to Lindsay Kramer about a particular student that we both know, and how most of the school had written him off as, oh, he's just a bad kid, he's a troubled kid. Mm-hmm. But when Lindsay got him, and I interacted with him too, we realized where that was coming from, where a lot of his behavior, the source of it, and treated him like a human. And I think that there's do you see sometimes us going the opposite direction, or the other end of the pendulum, where we're being too easy, or we're not providing enough structure? Or do you see kids feeling like there are no consequences for their action? That's kind of a tough question, but
it is. The reason why it is an issue, mm-hmm. is because now there's so much awareness on where behavior stems from, mm-hmm. and because now it's not so black and white. It's not, oh, he or she is misbehaving because they're just being disrespectful, or they're just because they're bad. And because we know there's so many different antecedents, I can never say this word.
Compartmentalize. Yeah.
I can never say that word. Behavior.
Trying to get me to say exacerbate. I can't even.
Exasperate?
Yeah, I don't even. Right? That's my word. I tried to sound so smart the other day. I was like, does that exacerbate the issue? And I said, does it make it worse? You know, so I'm with you.
I can't find a better word than the one I just told you. I'm not saying the C word. Yes. That once we have all those components of what potentially can be the problem, it gets so exhausting that we don't know what the consequence should be. So we're just kind of like, just leave it alone. And the parents have a lot to do with why some children are not getting the discipline that it's required. Because I think discipline is very, very important to let kids know right from wrong. Because we think about their future also. Discipline is very, very important. And of course, there's different ways in doing it, but it's important to do it. And I feel like a lot of our hands are kind of tied because of the parents.
Yeah,
those are the ones that kind of have us like this.
Yes,
and then they're no help either.
And it's going back to that consistency. You could be the miracle worker. You could be Ann Sullivan with Helen Keller 5 days a week, but if they go home and all of that positive behavior gets extinguished. And this is another thing too that I think a lot of folks forget, is that these kids, they go home, and in their home environment, some of those negative behaviors are reinforced at home because they see at home, this is what mom or dad does and they get rewarded, or this is what the other kids in the neighborhood do. Like they'll see an older kid steal and not get in trouble. Well, they want to be cool like that kid. But then when they go to school, it could actually be confusing to a kid who, when they come to school, there's these set of rules. When they go, they see a different set of rules. A lot of times I tried to explain to students that in the classroom, this is how we speak, because they'll try to get slang and try to throw a lot of stuff in. I didn't want to say that what they're saying is wrong, because then that's saying all your friends and family are wrong. But like acts is I hear it a lot, and I would try to correct them, but I'd say, instead of it being wrong, this is the way in the classroom, this is how, and the reason why is you want to be able to speak professional, so that when you go to interview for a job, or when you're at your job, you can be seen as professional, and that can lead to promotions and success. And that's the way I tried to explain it to them. And for the most part, I think it worked. I don't know. But
it works. It works. I think. When I was subbing and I was working in that one class, I didn't have any behaviors or IEPs or anything like that. Yeah. And so when you talk to children like that about how they're about the future,
yes.
I noticed that it works pretty well because they grasp that concept. See, unfortunately, when you work with kids with autism, they which is the children I usually work with.
Yeah.
It's difficult because they have a difficult time making those type of connections, because everything's kind of like right now. But going back to what you said about whatever goes on at home, because some kids can do things at home and leave at home and come to school.
Some kids can't. Yeah,
and a lot of kids can't, especially children with autism, because whatever's presented to them, it is on the menu.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Which is why when I had my daughter and I knew that, I was controlling, because I wanted her to be able to function in society. So I did all the stuff at home. And then whatever we were doing, if we were going to like families' houses, because when you take your kids to an aunt's house or grandma's house, like, oh, just give them this or give them that. And I'm like, no, this is how we're doing everything. Yeah. And I'm telling you, I wasn't the most liked person in my family for the first 6 years of my daughter's life, because I came there with a lot of rules. I'm like, look, we can't have this, we can't have that. We have to speak politely. My dad, he lives in California. He uses a lot of curse words. So my daddy, you can't say those things. He's like, yeah, but no, you cannot say that. All right. And we say please and thank you. And then her brothers and sisters from her dad, when they were all screaming, shut up. We do not say shut up. Okay. That's not how we say it. We say be quiet. So I'm here teaching them. But that's what you do as a parent.
But they have to be aware of that, and why you're doing that, and it's out of love, and it's out of, hey, this is how we're going to make this effective, and it's got to be so frustrating, and that was always a frustration thing I had. How frustrating is it though when you have this success with a student, and then, like in some cases, they go like they might spend 1 week with their mom, the other week with their dad, or they'll go away for a little bit and come back, and then it feels like all the progress you made was undone or weakened.
Wow. Well, I didn't allow that to happen, which accounts to why, for personal reasons, I've been taking care of my child on my own. Mm-hmm. Because it is frustrating. Yeah. All the work that you put into parenting when you have a child with a disability, mm-hmm. and because you're sacrificing everything. And the thing is, it's only, you know what it is? It's the first 5 years where you have to be like anal about everything. Because I was only like that for like the beginning, because that's when their personalities are formed. I don't have to do that. Yeah. Now that's why the first 5 years is crucial. Every move you make, everything you do, you have to be like that. So that once they start elementary school, the teachers don't have to worry about it. Because that was my whole thing, besides my daughter, besides providing her with the tools and resources she needs in order to function and to thrive in the class and in life, is to make sure the teachers don't have that burden, because it's not their job. Mm-hmm. It's not your job to teach my kid, to behave. And of course, some kids are going to have some behaviors, but I try to do the best I could to make my child a little easier in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I feel like, do you feel like that some parents though have some misconceptions about teaching teachers and what their responsibilities are supposed to be, and do you think, and my experience is, I think a lot of it, there are some, just like there's probably about 5% of teachers, there's probably 5% that are terrible at their job, probably shouldn't be teaching, but there's 5% of parents that are probably just not good parents. What I feel like a lot of parents are more, they're either afraid to address certain topics, or they're protective of their child, and they don't want their child to be taken advantage of. Do you feel like there's some misconceptions that parents have, being both sides, being both a parent of a child with autism, but also being an educator? What are some misconceptions that you feel need to be dispelled with parents and teachers?
Well, for starters, parents have this idea of teachers that you guys we do it all. Mm-hmm. So that's for one. And they feel that whatever they can't teach their child, you guys are going to do it. That's one thing. Now, when it comes to parents with children with disabilities, the parenting reaction and experiences to their child with disability has a big effect on how their children function. So you have parents that are aware their kid has a disability, mm-hmm. But they don't accept it. So when they don't accept it, that's an
important difference right there.
Yeah, they don't accept it. They may look for services or something, but they don't accept it, so they can't really put their all into helping their child. Now, you got some people that accept it to the point where they start coddling, and they use a disability as an excuse why their kid can't do this, why their kid can't do that. So if their kid is misbehaving in the class a lot, they're like, oh, well, because of his autism, or, because of his ADHD, or because, they make up all these excuses. Well, because they don't know about how to deal with behavior. Yeah. Then you have some that try to get all these services because they're trying to force the disability out of the kid to make them normal. So then it becomes
Yeah, like they want an exorcism or something.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I learned that after the pandemic, I decided to go in different fields. Like I was doing ABA, and then I became a skills building specialist because I want to see what it was like working with adults with autism. I was so curious, and it was so eye-opening. A client that I had, 22 years old, his mom, and man received all the services out there for autism, everything. Wow. But when it was time to help my client with independent living skills, the mom was always in the way. All the time. And I tried to kind of get to know her to see what her life was like, and she's dedicated all of her life to her son, which, I mean,
you get. Yeah.
I get it for sure, but the way she was doing it, it wasn't I'm trying to help my son so he can function and he can go out there and he can be independent. I'm like, I'm going to help my son because he can't do it on his own.
Yeah.
He can't do it. So when I was trying to help, she kept getting in the way, and I'm like, I can't work like this.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot, and I'm like, parents that don't find their kids capable are the ones that they can't see that child's natural potential. And then what happens? Behaviors, you don't see what the potential is, because sometimes academically they may not do so well, but oh my God, there's such an artist, or there's such a musician, or maybe there's a topic that they're genius in. Like every child with autism has something that's spectacular.
Yeah.
But you gotta observe your kid. You gotta find what that is. You gotta give them the services, and you gotta nurture that potential. Because I personally don't believe that. I don't see autism as a disability, because you know when you break that word disability, you know, and Angie told this to me. We considered it a different ability.
Yeah.
You know? And you just gotta find the way to understand how they work.
It's funny because, you know, I have also a mental health podcast too, and I just finished rapping with not rapping like that, but I finished chatting with a friend of mine who suffers from ADHD, and we talked about differently abled, like neurodivergent people, and as a child, and it's interesting because I felt like this when I was a kid too, and I wonder if like gifted children, or you're differently abled or differently neurodivergent, you see the world differently, and as you grow, you develop differently. So you may develop strongly in one area, but you may be much more delayed in another. And that causes those milestones, those checkpoints, those points where, you know, most other children are developing. They're here. You might be like this, but that's also a sign of perhaps creativity, or a sign of being gifted in certain, like maybe visually gifted, or gifted, you know, artistically gifted in something. Mm-hmm. And I see that. I see, you know, the term twice exceptional, I see, but in my interactions with a lot of students, like gifted students can come across as differently abled. Yeah, I had students that were identified as gifted, but they also showed signs of autism. They showed signs of being neurodivergent, and I started to think that maybe that's kind of the, I don't want to say negative, but like, because it's not disabled, it's not a disability. It's, and then I don't know if it's differently abled, or if it's just kind of like a different way to manage yourself, you know. And I think that because Angie is very creative, you know, Angie's very creative, and she's funny. She's very funny, but it's like, I wonder, and you think about like a lot of the most famous artists, it seemed like they had things they were dealing with. Van Gogh cut his ear off. So it's kind of like, you know, I wonder if there's something to that. And like you said, finding that value to unlock. Do you see kind of that pattern?
Yeah, the way I see it is that we would have to analyze all that less if we weren't so focused on tailoring
Ooh.
people to society's expectations.
Oh,
Because it's all about society. How is society? What is it like? We need to conform. We have to.
Do you have another hour? Because that's a that. Ooh, I love. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about. I mean, what? Let me ask you this question: If you were given the keys to the education department, you were in charge of the United States Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
What changes would you make? What would you enhance? What would you keep? What
Mm-hmm.
would you change? What would you eliminate? If you were if you had a magic wand and you could change the education system.
Oh wow, that's another hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm cool. I got nowhere to go today.
Okay. Well,
about 6:00 I got no. Okay.
Okay. When it comes to special ed, I wouldn't put special ed and typical developing kids all in one school.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do it. When it comes to education, I would focus its behavior. I mean, we can't control the parents.
Nope.
We can't control it. So I would put more emphasis in the beginning stages, like pre-K and kindergarten, first grade, second grade. When it comes, I would put more emphasis on behavior, manners, etiquette, how to function.
Yes.
In society, in a classroom, in a store, like independent living skill. I would just focus on that, social skills. That just be number one.
Yeah.
And I always said I always wanted to open a autism school, but not an autism school like what you think. Have you ever heard of STREAM?
I've not heard of STREAM.
Okay, so STREAM is an extension of STEM.
Okay.
So the R is
STEAM, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the R for STREAM is for reading, and the A is for the arts,
yes.
Like just music, artistry, and stuff like that, drama. So the schools will be focused on kids that have that natural potential for, if it's just science, if they're just so scientifically inclined, but they may not be so inclined to other things. Yeah. Technology, the technology, they have this raw talent for technology, for reading. Expert readers in the arts. You have your artists that don't always do so well academically, but wow, how that talent for math. And then we just focus on nurturing that, and then those become. That's what we teach the other things, but we don't make that such a emphasis. Because we want them to be leaders of what they're really good at.
You think about it, we have ODS, but why couldn't we have a differently abled school like ODS? Because ODS, I think that they focus on the wicked smart kids as they are identified. But again, I think you could take just about any student and you're going to find stuff that they're really really sharp with. But I almost feel like, why can't we have schools like that? I think that would be tremendous.
Yeah, and I would the teacher training. The teacher training would be not just like, I know you take these exams and you take these classes. It is mandatory for you to, of course, get a degree in education, but you have to be a certified behavior therapist. You need to take ABA classes. You need to have all these behavior techniques in your belt, just to have it. Not saying that you got to apply ABA, but it's when you have behavior techniques in your belt, you're a little bit more confident on how to approach behaviors that kind of just show up. So I would change that. I would also like to give these like personality exams. It's hard to explain. I feel like some teachers are not teaching for the right reasons.
I think you're right there. I think there's a good portion that do, but I think there are some that think that this is an easier job than they realize.
Yeah, and it's not.
They're very surprised.
It's not, and it's traumatizing to kids. I want to make sure that whoever's teaching is someone who is highly dedicated, who's teaching for the right reasons.
Yes.
It's stuff like that. And of course, I know the pay is always something very, very important. Why not get paid more? If I have control of that, I'll be
absolutely
putting some more money out there.
I think you could make the position be more attractive and more compensatory. This is a vocabulary lesson. More compensatory with their education. One of the things I found when I got my master's is I got in and I realized, wow, how am I going to pay my student loan back if I'm getting a teacher's salary with this minuscule bump in salary for my master's? You would attract more professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll attract more people that become teachers for the right reasons. The myth about, we don't have to pay them more because teachers want to teach. No, you're going to lose good teachers because there's a lot of teachers that don't teach because they can't afford to become a teacher. You know what I mean? Like they got to stick with a job they probably aren't satisfied with to make ends meet. I think you're absolutely right.
I think dedication and passion and drive a lot of times does trump the compensatory concept. I mean, I know I sound like a little idealistic here, but I mean, that's for me. I don't like throwing this out there, but when people see me studying, you're like, oh, you're getting your master's, what are you studying for? Yeah. And when I blush and I tell them I'm getting my PhD, they're like, and wondering, they always say, why aren't you a teacher? Why aren't you a teacher? And I have my reasons why I'm not, but I love what I do.
Yeah.
I could. I mean, realistically, let's talk monetary for a minute. I've been offered some pretty good positions in the field of behavior, but what I do, I make such a difference, like where I'm at right now, and I love it. And that, for me, is everything. And that's what I would, like I said, if I had it my way, and I was like the HR of the United States for teachers, that would be like number one. Dedication.
I think you should be paid more. I think because of that passion, because of that, and maybe not right away because because maybe there should be some kind of thinning the herd as like probationary period or what have you. But those teachers that are like you, that are passionate, there should be a significant bump. And I think that a lot more teachers would feel better. Let me get away from pay. Let's talk staffing. I mean, you mentioned how like kindergarten and preschool has an assistant. What if every grade had an assistant?
Oh, absolutely. I strongly believe in collaborating and having more than one, because we're not perfect. We're gonna have our days where we're just like not feeling it. We're going through a personal problem, or maybe there's a child in particular that we just like. I'm not feeling that kid right now.
Yeah.
Tag team, you go. It's your turn. I think that's very important. I think sometimes when it's just you in the classroom, it all weighs on you. You can just love the kids so much. You know what you're doing. But as a human being, it's just like, wow, I can't go to the bathroom because I can't leave them alone.
Yeah.
I can't have my lunch because I got to do this, and I can't leave them alone. I have to make sure I'm in my best behavior, smiling, make them feel good, because nobody else can do it because, it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely get 2 teachers, and there won't be a teacher and a teacher assistant. There would be teacher, and we would change the word. We wouldn't call them teachers, we'll call them something else, because if I'm changing the training on how they're trained, if you're not only just getting your master's, then I'm going to make sure there's some way they pay for that, but you're going to be a certified behavior therapist as well.
Nice. And so, having that second person, that equal peer in the same thing, and you guys could work together, I think that would be tremendous. And let's talk class sizes.
Yeah, 20 is like ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, some cases 28. I had most I've ever had in a classroom was 28 kids, and that was insane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I just to kind of give some background, I am most effective with small group teaching. You know, if I have 5 or 6 at my table, actually usually 4 is the magic number, but if I have 6 at my table, I can manage that enough to really be effective. I've always found my whole group instruction, I'm 10 minutes tops before I start losing them. Even I could have the most entertaining lesson and be the most charismatic and have all this engaging things and talking about TikTok and Among Us and all this, but I'm still going to lose them after 10 minutes. But when I have that small group rotation, I can hit everybody and I can be effective, and I can also play around with the level. Like my first group might be my low group and I have to start basic, but then my next group might be a higher group and I can challenge them at their level. Plus I can also move, like maybe I'll send 3 kids back to their seat to work on something and bring this kid that's super high and work on something there. But I feel like
14.
When you have 6 kids at your table, you've got 14 kids working independently. Now, if you have 2 teachers, they could probably take them at another table. But even managing independent work is incredibly difficult.
A lot of children these days have a hard time doing things independently. And I can say that as, you know, when I was substituting and I was in different classrooms, it was very difficult for them to do things on their own. You know, so I was always being called, I need help with this, I need help with that. And I was surprised because I'm like, I thought you were all tech savvy.
Yeah. You know how to log on to a Fortnite, but you can't, you know. You can't
because that's another thing. Because what you were talking about, what you were doing, I actually did the same thing when I was subbing for a class for a very long time. Because when you're a sub, you kind of just go in there and you just do whatever because that's not your class. But I was, you know, working with a group in particular for a long time. So I'm like, okay, well, let me just start planning. And I noticed that I had kids that were really, really low, really low. I had kids in the middle, and then I had advanced kids. I'm like, okay, wow, okay, how am I going to do this one? Especially when it came to math. When I pulled out math, I had all these kids crying with their heads down, and I'm like, and then I had kids in the back, oh, I know this already. This is easy. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Well, that doesn't help. Yeah, but, but thankfully, I've had some great teachers that helped me, and I'm like, look, I have these advanced kids over here, and you're in advanced class. Why don't I just scoop them up while I get these other ones on level? Yeah. And I was able to, you know, I know there's because there's a certain time frame. I know that teachers have to teach certain things. Yeah. And it's very condensed, and the time's like this, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna take my time.
All right. The CEO of Education.
Oh.
How much micromanagement would you? How would you assess student learning, and how would you make? That's kind of even complicated. First things first. How much autonomy would you give teachers? And what would be your expectations versus what would you allow them to do? Would you just let them go in the kitchen and cook? And then just as long as they hit these marks, or would there be certain things that they must do at certain times?
I want the teachers to feel free, to be innovative, to teach, to change it up, because at the end of the day, whatever set of students they have, they're all going to be different. Different personalities, they're coming from different countries, or they have different backgrounds. Academically, you have so many mixed levels in one grade. It's important for me to provide that trust, which is why I'm going to be so particular on who becomes a teacher, because like I said, that dedication, that passion, and that's I feel like if you give that teacher that space and that freedom to address their kids, because they know their kids.
Yeah.
They know how they able to work and learn. I don't believe in standardized anything, but there will be some type of structured, form of trying to see how everyone's learning.
Yeah, benchmark check-ins kind of thing.
But you know what? That's something I couldn't just do right away. I would have to. It's kind of like with ABA. The first thing you do is pair with the child, and you have to pair with them because you're observing them, you're learning them, and then little by little, as you get to know them, that's when you start implementing programs, and then that's how you decipher progress. So it would kind of be the same thing.
Yeah.
I got to learn what the class is about. We would have to open up more positions, actually, to do that, to have a person come in there, and get to really know the class and the kids. We may have to start switching up. It will be complicated, but it could be done.
Yeah.
Switching up I don't like saying test, assessments.
Yeah. Yes.
Assessments on having children. I'm big on having children monitor their own progress too, so they can be like self-sufficient.
Buy-in is important.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's important, I want to talk about student buy-in too. Not to derail you. Go ahead and finish your thought, but I want to circle back to student buy-in in a moment.
Oh no, it was something that I did in my class where I gave everybody jobs so they can feel important. I had a captain of administration who was the one that passed around all the papers, and I had my I had my safety patrols, I had my deputies of behavior, I had my of security, my head of security, who made sure that the door was all the everything. And I feel like if we had that set of jobs for all those kids and just making them responsible, and I don't know, I actually like that idea that all kids start, if they all had a job in particular, they would feel more proud of doing their work.
Ownership of the community they're in. They'll take ownership. That's the best way to really build a classroom family. We use the word, they're part of something. They have stake in it. There's something for them here, and they'll get up instead of getting up to bed and going, oh, I got to go to this place. They're like, I get to go to room 42, or I get to go to room 25, I get to go to room whatever, and like that student buy-in too is so important. And I think it also, especially in like that third or fourth grade, is it Erickson where that age was 7 and above, where they're starting to find out who they are, that identity, and sharing the data with them, like not just here's your grade, but like, hey, here's how you did on that math test. Check this out. Look here, this is what I'm looking at. I noticed that you did great on the elapsed time with the digital clock, but you struggled with the elapsed time with the analog clock. What do you think that is? And they'll go, oh, I misread the clock. Yeah. So what we just need to do is practice, instead of them having this is the grade I got, and I don't know why I got this grade, having that buy-in and sharing that data with them so they understand. I feel like it builds confidence in them when they know, hey, oh, this is where I am and this is where I need to go, instead of this mystery, oh, I'm bad at math kind of thing. Yeah.
We actually started a system, because a lot of times when the kids get a report card, like that old APP, they really don't know what that means.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with the proficiency-based grading, it's not like what you and I went through where it's A, B, C, D, F. It's novice, developing proficiency, and then advanced proficient.
Right. So what we do is that we taught that to our students. We taught all that, and then when we provide instruction, we give grades. So the end for us is I'm not trying. Because you got some kids that are like, the N is not trying. The DP is I'm trying, and then the P is passed and AP is amazing or something like that. So and then every time we're doing something, especially math, something is difficult, and they're trying. Oh, we have so many DPs here. I love that we're trying. This is amazing. Oh, we got a P over here. We got an AP over here. And then if there's a child that just doesn't want, and I'm like, I don't. You know what? We have an N right now, but that can change. And we use that because some kids don't realize that report cards go home.
They're supposed to. There are a couple that got lost in the backpacks somehow.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, it's emailed to us. We get it, but and I noticed that when kids get to see their progress, that there's that motivation to keep going, and I would definitely implement that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I like to. Make the analogy of a video game is that N stands for novices, and you just picked up the controller for the first time. You're just learning how to basically play the game. DP, and that's the thing that used to drive me nuts, is that a lot of parents, even teachers too, to some degree, some teachers, DP is seen as a bad grade, and it's not. For one, it's very general, because you could have two students with a DP and have completely different reasons for it. You have one student who she's been just really working so hard, and she just hasn't quite got there. She's developing, but she's almost there. And then you have the other kid who's kind of trying. They're better than novice, but they're trying to get there. And I always told my parents that the most important part of the report card is the comment, because that tells the story of why, because of what the DP is and what they, and I think that's important for the kids to read the comments, to understand, hey, this is where you are. And I feel like there's some challenges that change in mentality, which I actually like. It might need some more work, but I feel like it focuses on the growth in proficiency rather than this, almost like you're branded B-. You're a B- student. Well, that doesn't show any opportunity for growth. I don't think so. Want to ask us, I nominate you right now for CEO of Education. Well, let's make this happen. Come on. Let's get with that. But I want to ask you, as a parent, and how, when you because I remember you told me that you held off on explaining to Angie her and I don't want to say condition, her autism diagnosis, her diagnosis as being autistic. That happened recently. How did that conversation go, and how did that affect or change Angie's perspective on herself?
Well, I felt like she was ready, because she was always saying that she felt different. That some students, some kids didn't like her. I mean that some kids didn't like her, that some kids didn't understand her, and that she felt different. And then once she said that, that's when I was motivated to, okay, it's time.
Yeah,
it's time. And really, it's not that I was hiding it from her. I
didn't mean it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, no. Some people would just assume, and I wasn't hiding it from her. I was concerned about two things. One, if she would utilize it to misbehave, because you got kids that are doing that. That's my ADHD.
Yeah. I'm autistic, Mom. That's why I threw the burrito across the room. Yeah.
So that's really the main reason. And two, I didn't want to say it as in like it was a problem, because it's not. So I said, well, honey, I told her, I forgot how it went, because it kind of happened. I never had a speech planned. Yeah. It just happened. I told her that she had autism, and a lot of times kids that have autism have different ways of socializing.
Yeah.
And because they have different ways of socializing, some people find it funny and exciting and they love it. Other kids, they just can't handle it, and that's cool, you know? And I told her about other kids that she knew that had autism, that I had the okay from the parents, you know? And I told her, so-and-so, do you know so-and-so got autism? It's like, really? I'm like, yeah. Thing is that, you know, you guys are what we call high functioning.
Yeah.
And then she started wondering what the mechanisms were. I'm like, well, we have this. And then she wanted to know everything about autism. And my nephew, her cousin, who's 11, is also on the spectrum, but he's nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, so like cousin, so and so, and I'm like, yeah. She's like, yeah, but I talk, and I'm like, okay, well, here's about the spectrum. So it became an educational conversation, nice. And she's like, well, that explains everything, and I was like, I'm like, yeah. And then she was like, why didn't you tell me before? And I'm like, I don't know, I kind of forgot. Sorry.
Yeah, we were just going. Yeah, and sometimes that's just you don't think about it.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's it. And now she knows that it's like.
Has there been an improvement in her confidence, or does she seem more like? Has there been a change in her social circle, or?
Oh, the social circle. Well,
okay. Well,
this is an adolescent thing that's going on right now.
She's getting ready to start middle school after this year, right? So,
I think I'm more anxious than she is about it.
Well, I have gray hair for a reason, and that's every time another generation of kids go to middle school, I turn grayer.
Yeah, no, her confidence is definitely better because now she understands and she's more accepting. Mm-hmm. Because she was just focused on what other people thought about her. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, Angie, she is a little impressionable. So there's a lot of conversations that we have about being who we are, being ourselves is so important.
Yeah.
And that we're all, I mean, it's cliche saying we're all different for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But that, you know, it is boring if everybody was the same.
Yeah.
And I always tell her, I'm like, you're going to have a lot of kids, people that don't like you. And that's okay. Because because as an adult, there's people that I like and there's people I don't like. But here's the important thing: you have to tolerate those people. So you being in school, it's not about math and science and English. You also have to learn to coexist with people that don't like you. You have to accept that, and it has nothing to do with you. You know, mm-hmm. you just not their cup of tea. Do you like everybody?
Yeah,
she's like, no, because they're not your cup of tea. That's it.
Exactly. You don't have to like every jelly bean in the Jelly Belly box, you know?
Yeah, especially the little throw-up ones.
Yeah, yeah, the booger ones are Well, that's fantastic, and I I'm so proud of the progress she's made, and I'm super proud and just excited for you. I think you should consider writing a book.
I did.
You did? Is it published yet?
No, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it to get published. I'm waiting because I don't have the money right now. And I was close because there's so many what they call like vanity publishers out there, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be taken advantage of. I wanted to wait after my doctorate.
Gotcha. Yeah.
To publish it.
Got that PhD on there. Dr. Garcia says, I always wanted to get my PhD just so I could be in a planning meeting, and then when somebody disagrees and they go, well, Dr. Burden said, not my book on the ground on the table. That would be so cool. Well, you know, Dr. Burden disagrees. But that's awesome. That's fantastic. Please do that. And I'd love to have you come back on. I'd love to come back on anyways. I do want to try. I'm thinking about doing a roundtable with about 3 or 4 special educators and talk about the state of special education in the United States. And then there's a couple folks from the UK that I might bring on to talk about the differences between the United States and UK. But this has been as phenomenal, if not better, than I knew it would be. Talking with you. This has been fantastic. Jeanette, you're one of my favorite people on the planet. Students are blessed to be working with you. and it's been great being your colleague. And I'd love to have you back on again. Do you have any final words of wisdom for educators out there or parents that may be listening as well?
Well, for parents, it's understandable that when you find out your child has disability, there is something called the grieving process, and it's very natural to go through that grieving process where you're scared about your child's future, and the fact that they're different and that you don't consider them normal. It's okay to feel that for a second, but don't stay in that place, because how you feel about your child has a huge impact on their ability to flourish. Because you will stifle their progress, because what you think of your child is what they think of themselves. And if you believe that your child isn't capable, they're going to think the same way, and you're going to close the doors. So please accept, if they have a disability, it's okay. Accept it. There's so much assistance out there, and everything's going to be fine. And there's a lot of support groups, and there's a lot of, like I said, services out there to help them and to help you. I mean, I feel like you need to see someone. It's important, because I know it's a little traumatic for parents sometimes. They have a hard time dealing with it. But make sure you deal with it, so then you can put them on the right track.
And on the right track.
On the right track, all right?
Well, okay. On that note, thank you so much. Soon to be Dr. Garcia. That's going to be awesome to add that little note on there. But Jeanette, thank you for joining us. On behalf of Jeanette, thank you for listening to this edition of the Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden. Have a great week and take care of yourself. Bye. Catch full episodes of the Educators Podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes to anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.